Howdy, howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Freak today as we dive into part 6 of Thunderhead by Neil Schussman. It's too bright, you can't see it, but it's called Endura and Nod. Without further ado, let's knock this out. This is a longer chapter, about 20 pages, so it'll be a longer episode. And we're getting there, guys. We're getting to the end. Less than 100 pages now. The Island of the Enduring Heart, also known as Endura, is a towering achievement of human engineering. And when I say human, I mean just that. While it was constructed using technologies that I pioneered, it was designed and built entirely by human hands, with no interference from me. I suppose it was a matter of pride for the Scythedom that it would create such a wondrous place on its own. And, as one might expect, it is a monument to the Scythedom's collective ego. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There is something to be said for the architecture of anima. Structures conceived in the furnace of biological passions. They have an audacious sensibility that is breathtaking and impressive, even while being somewhat offensive. The floating island, positioned in the Atlantic, southeast of the Sargasso Sea and midway between Africa and the Americas, is more like a massive vessel than a feature of geography. It has a circular structure, 4 kilometers in diameter, full of gleaming spires, lush parks, and spectacular water features. From above, it resembles the Scythedom symbol, the unblinking eye between long, curved blades. I have no cameras on Endura. This is intentional, a necessary consequence of the separation of Scythe and State. While I have buoy cams stationed throughout the Atlantic, the closest ones are 20 miles from Endura shore. I see the island from a distance, therefore all I truly know about what goes in Endura and what comes out. The Thunderhead. Chapter 39, A Predatory View. Scythes Anastasia and Curie arrived on one of the Scythedom's luxurious private jets, which was richly appointed and seemed more like a tubular chalet than an airplane. A gift from some aircraft manufacturer, Scythe Curie explained. The Scythedom even gets its planes for free. Their approach pattern took them in an arc around the floating isle, giving Anastasia a stunning view. Everything that wasn't gorgeous gardens was glistening crystal with bright titanium white buildings. There was a huge circular lagoon in the center of the island, open to the sea, the island's eye. It was the arrival point for submersible transports, and it was a full pleasure of craft. In the center of the eye, set apart from everything else, was the World Scythe Council complex, connected to the mainland around it by 3 bridges. It's even more impressive than the pictures, Anastasia commented. Scythe Curie leaned over to look out the window as well. As many times I've been here, Endura never ceases to amaze me. How often have you been here? Perhaps a dozen times. Vacation, mostly. It's a place to come where no one looks at us strangely, no one fears us, we aren't the immediate center of attention when we walk into a room. In Endura, we get to be humans again. Although Scythe Anastasia suspected that even in Endura, the grand aim of death was a bit of a celebrity. The tallest tower set apart on its own hill, Scythe Curie explained, was the Founder's Tower. It's where you'll find the Museum of the Scythedom, with the vault of relics and features, as well as the very heart for which the name of this island. But even more impressive was a series of 7 identical towers, evenly spaced around the island's central eye. One for each of the Grand Slayers of the World Scythe Council, their underscythes, and their extensive staffs. The Scythedom's seat of power was a web of bureaucracy, like the authority interface, without the benefit of the Thunderhead to make it run smoothly, which meant it made policy at a snail's pace, and had many months of backlogged items on its docket. Only the most urgent business was moved to the top of the list, business such as the inquest over the Mid-American election. It puffed Anastasia up a bit to know that she had created a brouhaha big enough to demand the immediate attention of the World Scythe Council. And, for the Council, a 3-month wait was like the speed of light. Endura's open to all Scythes and their guests, Scythe Curie told her. Your family could even live here if they wanted. Anastasia tried to imagine her parents and Ben in a city of Scythes, and it made her brain hurt. Upon landing, they were met by Scythe Seneschal, Xenocrates' first underscythe, whose drab maroon robe clashed with the brighter surroundings. Anastasia wondered how many mid-American scythes Xenocrates had brought with him. His 3 underscythes were a given. If he took too many, there would be a huge need for apprentices, and that would mean an influx of more New Order scythes. Welcome to the island of the Enduring Heart, Seneca said with his usual lack of enthusiasm. I'll take you to your hotel. Like the rest of the island, the hotel was state-of-the-art affair, with polished green malachite floors, a towering crystalline atrium, and a huge service staff to meet their every need. It almost reminds me of the Emerald City, Anastasia commented, recalling a mortal-age children's tale. Yes, said Scythe Curie with a mischievous grin, and I once did have my eyes dyed to match my robe. Seneca had them bypass reception where an impatient line of vacationing Scythes had formed, and an irritated Scythe in a robe of white feathers raged against the incompetence of the staff for apparently not meeting all his needs fast enough. Some Scythes didn't enjoy not being the immediate center of attention. "This way," said Seneca. "I'll send a bellhop for your bags." It was here that Anastasia noticed something that had been on the edge of her perception since she had arrived. It was actually brought to her attention by a small child waiting with his family at the elevator. He pointed to one of the elevator doors and turned on his mother. "What does out of order mean?" "It means that the elevator doesn't work." But the boy couldn't wrap his mind around the concept. How can an elevator not work? His mother had no answer, so gave him a smack instead, which distracted him. Now Anastasia thought back to their arrival, how their flight had to circle several times before landing, something to do with the air traffic control system. And she had noticed a scrape on the side of a pal car just outside of the terminal. She had never seen such a thing before. And the line at reception? She had heard of the clerks saying their registration computer is having issues. How does a computer have issues? In the world that Anastasia knew, things simply worked. The Thunderhead made sure of it. Never an out-of-order sign, because the instant something ceased to function, a team was sent to repair it. Nothing was ever out of order long enough to need a sign. "What Scythe are you?" asked the little boy, but with his accent it sounded like Scythe. Anastasia pegged him as from the Texas region, although some southern parts of East America had that friendly drawl. "I'm Scythe Anastasia." "My uncle's the Honorable Seth Howard Hughes," he announced, "so we got immunity. He's here giving a symphonium about how to properly glean with a bowie knife." "Symposium," his mother corrected quietly. "I've only used a bowie knife once," Anastasia told him. "You should do it more often," said the boy. "They're double-edged at the tip. Very efficient." "Yes," agreed Scythe Curie. "At least more efficient than these elevators." The boy began to swipe his hand through the air as if he were wielding the knife. "I want to be a Scythe one day," he said, which ensured he never would be, unless, that is, the New Order Scythes gained control of his region. An elevator arrived, and Anastasia made a move to enter, but Scythe Seneca stopped her. "That one's going up," he said flatly. "We're not going up?" "Obviously not." She looked to Scythe Curie, who didn't seem at all surprised. "So they're putting us in the basement?" Scythe Seneca scoffed at the suggestion and didn't dignify it with a response. "You forget we're on a floating island," Scythe Curie pointed out. "A full third of the city is below the waterline." Their suite was on sub-level 7, and featured a floor-to-ceiling picture window filled with brightly colored tropical fish darting about. It was a stunning view that was partially blocked by a figure standing in front of it. "Ah, you've arrived," said Zernakty, stepping forward to greet them. Neither Scythe Curie nor Anastasia was particularly friendly with their former Highblade. Anastasia never quite forgave him for accusing her of killing Scythe Faraday, but the need for diplomacy was greater than her need to hold a personal grudge. "We didn't expect you to greet us personally, Your Exalted Excellency," said Scythe Curie. He shook their hands in that hearty, two-handed way he had. "Yes, well, it wouldn't do to have you visit my offices. It would have the appearance of favoritism in the matter of Mid-American Highblade." "But you're here," Anastasia pointed out. "Does that mean that we have your support for the inquest?" Zernakty sighed. "Alas, I have been asked by Supreme Blade Kala to recuse myself. She feels I cannot be impartial, and I'm afraid she's right." He took a moment to look at Scythe Curie, and for a moment it seemed he had dropped his own personal defenses. He actually seemed honest. "You know, I may not have always seen eye to eye, Marie, but there is no question that Goddard would be a disaster. I truly hope your inquest against him is a success, and although I am not allowed to vote, I am rooting for you." Which Anastasia noted would be of no use whatsoever. She did not know the other 6 Grand Slayers, only what Scythe Curie had told her. 2 were sympathetic to the New Order ideals, 2 were opposed, and 2 were wild cards. The inquest could go either way. Anastasia turned away from the other Scythes, enamored of the view. It was a pleasant distraction for the moment at hand. It would be nice to be like those fish, to have no concerns beyond survival and blending into the school. Being just a part of the whole, rather than an isolated individual in a world of turning hostile. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Zernakty, coming up beside her. "Endura serves as a huge artificial reef, and the sea life in a 20-mile radius is infused with nanites that allow us to control them." He grabbed a tablet off the wall. "Observe." He tapped a few times, and the colorful cliff veered away like a parting curtain. In a moment, the ocean before them was full of jellyfish, deceptively soothing as they undulated beyond the huge window. "You could change your living view to anything you want," Zernakty held the tablet out to hear. "Try it." Anastasia took the tablet and sent the jellyfish away. Then she found what she was looking for in the menu. A single reef shark approached, then another and another, until the view was full of them. A larger tiger shark punctuated the scene, eyeing them soullessly through the window as it passed. "There," said Anastasia. "A much more accurate view of our current situation." Grand Slayer Xenocrates was not amused. "No one will ever accuse you of optimism, Miss Terranova," he said, intentionally using her birth name as a backhanded insult. He turned away from the shark-filled view. I will see you both at tomorrow's inquest. In the meantime, I've arranged a private tour of the city for you, and excellent seats for tonight's opera. Ada, I believe. And although neither Anastasia nor Marie were in the state of mind for such things, they did not decline the offer. Perhaps a day of pleasant diversions is what we need, Marie said, after Xenocrates had left. Then she took the tablet from Anastasia and dispersed the predatory view. After leaving Scythes, Anastasia, and Curie, His Exalted Excellency Grand Slayer Xenocrates surveyed his domain from the glass-walled, glass-roofed penthouse suite atop the North American Tower, which had been bestowed upon him, ascending to Grand Slayer status. It was one of 7 such residences, each one atop the Grand Slayer towers around the central eye of Endura. Within the eye, luxury submarines arrived and departed. Water taxis shuttled people about. Pleasure craft zigged back and forth. He could see one visiting Scythe on a jet ski, still in his robe, which was not a good idea. The fabric acted as a parasail, lifting him off the back of the jet ski and depositing him into the water. Idiot. The Scythedom was cursed with idiots. They might have been blessed with wisdom, but common sense was a trait sorely lacking among them. The sun beamed down on him through the glass roof, and he had his valet work the shades. It always seemed that the shade that would partially block the sun was inoperative, and getting a repairman was next to impossible, even for a Grand Slayer. This is only a recent occurrence, his valet told him. Since about the time of your arrival, things just haven't been working the way they should, as if somehow this plague of functional failure was Xenocrates' fault. He inherited his valet from Grand Slayer Hemingway. Only the Scythes in Hemingway's employ were required to self-glean along with him, but the service staff remained. It provided a sense of continuity, although Xenocrates suspected he'd eventually replace all of them so that he didn't have to feel they were always comparing him to their former employer. I find it ridiculous that the roof of this residence must also be made of glass, Xenocrates commented not for the first time. Feel as if I'm only on display for every passing aircraft and jetpacker. Yes, but the crystalline appearance of the tower pinnacles is beautiful, isn't it? Xenocrates harumphed at that. Isn't form supposed to follow function? Not in the Scythedom, replied his valet. So now Xenocrates had reached the shining peak of the world, the culmination of all his life's ambition, yet even now, he found himself projecting his next success. Someday, he would be Supreme Blade, even if he had to wait for all the other Grand Slayers to self-glean. There was, even in his new elevated position, a sense of humility he had not expected. He had gone from being the most powerful Scythe in Mid-America to being the junior-most Scythe on the World Council. And although the other 6 Grand Slayers had approved him for the position, it didn't mean they were ready to treat him as an equal. Even at this high level, there were dues to pay, respect to earn. For instance, upon his confirmation, just one day after Scythe Hemingway and his underscythes had self-gleaned, Supreme Blade Kahlo had made an offhand remark to Xenocrates in front of all the other Grand Slayers. So much heavy fabric must be an encumbrance, she said of his robe, especially here in the horse latitudes. Then she added without so much as a grin, you should find a way to shed some of it. Of course, she was not referring to the lighter fabric, but to the fact that it took so much of it to clothe him. He had gone beet red at the comment, and when he did, the Supreme Blade laughed. You look downright cherubic, Xenocrates, she said. That evening, he had a wellness technician adjust his nanites to substantially speed up his metabolism. As High Blade of Mid-America, maintaining an impressive weight was intentional. He was imposing, and it added to the impression of him being larger than life. But here among the Grand Slayers, he felt like an overweight child, chosen last for a sports team. With your metabolism dialed to maximum, it will take you 6 to 9 months to reach your optimal weight, the wellness tech had told him. It was much longer than he had patience for, but he had little choice in the matter. Well, at least he didn't have to curb his appetite and exercise, as they did in the mortal days. As he pondered his slowly shrinking belly and the follies of the vacationing Scythes below, his valet returned, looking a bit unsettled. Excuse me, your exalted excellency, he said. You have a visitor. Is it anyone I want to see? The valet's Adam's apple bobbed noticeably. It's Scythe Goddard. Which was absolutely the last person he wanted to see. Tell him I'm busy. But before the valet could even leave to deliver the message, Goddard barged in. Your exalted excellency, he said jovially. I hope I haven't caught you at a bad time. You have, Xenocrates said, but you're already here, so there's nothing I can do about it. He dismissed his valet with a wave of his hand, resigned that his encounter could not be sidestepped. What is it the Tonist had said? That which comes cannot be avoided? I've never seen a Grand Slayer's suite, Goddard said, strolling about the living room, examining everything from the furniture to the artwork. It's inspiring. Xenocrates wasted no time with small talk. I wish you to know that the moment you resurfaced, I made sure that Esme and her mother were hidden away in a place you'll never find them. So if it is your aim to use them against me, it won't work. Ah, yes. Esme, said Goddard, as if thinking about her for the first time in ages. How is your darling daughter? Growing like a weed, I imagine. Or more like a shrub. I do so miss her. Why are you here? Demanded Xenocrates, annoyed at Goddard's presence, and the blasted sunlight that kept shining into his eyes, and the air conditioner that could not find a consistent temperature. Just to be given equal time, Your Exalted Excellency, Goddard said. I know that you met with Scythe Curie this morning. It would seem biased to meet with her, and not with me. It would seem biased because it is, Xenocrates said. I don't approve of your ideas, or your actions, Goddard. I will not keep that a secret anymore. And yet you recused yourself from tomorrow's inquest. Xenocrates sighed, because the Supreme Blade asked me to. Now I'll ask you again, why are you here? And once more Goddard indulged himself in yet another beat around the bush. I merely wished to pay my respects to you, and apologize for past indiscretions, so that we may have a clean slate between us. Then he spread his arms, palms up in a beatific gesture, to indicate his new body. As you can see, I'm a changed man. And if I become High Blade of Mid-America, it will be in both of our interests to have a good relationship. Then Goddard stood at the great curved window, just as Xenocrates had done a few moments before, looking down at the view as if it might be his one day. I wish to know how the winds are blowing in the council, he said. Haven't you heard? Mocked Xenocrates. There are no winds at these latitudes. Goddard ignored him. I know that Supreme Blade Kahlo and Grand Slayer Cromwell do not support the ideals of New Order Scythes, but Grand Slayers Hideyoshi and Amundsen do. If you already know that, then why are you asking me? Because Grand Slayers Nzinga and Makalip have not expressed an opinion either way. It is my hope that you could appeal to them. And why would I do that? Because, said Goddard, in spite of your self-serving nature, I know that you are at heart a truly honorable Scythe. And as an honorable man, it is your duty to serve justice. He took a step closer. You know, as well as I do, that this inquest is not at all in the spirit of fairness. I believe your formidable diplomatic skills can persuade the council to put their worldviews aside and make a decision that is fair and just. And allowing you to become High Blade after a year's absence and with only 7% of you intact is fair and just. I'm not asking for that. I'm only asking that I not be disqualified before the vote is tallied. Let the Mid-American Scythedom speak. Let their decision stand, whatever it is. Xenocrates suspected that Goddard would be so magnanimous only if he somehow knew that he had won the election. Is that it? Asked Xenocrates. Is that all you've got? Actually, no, Goddard said, and finally got to the heart of his purpose here. Rather than saying anything, he reached into the inner pocket of his robe and pulled out another robe, folded and wrapped in a bow. Like a gift, he tossed it to Xenocrates. It was black, the robe of Scythe Lucifer. You caught him? Not only have I caught him, but I've brought him here to Endura to face judgment. Xenocrates gripped the robe. He had told Rowan that he didn't care if he was caught, that he had been true. Once Xenocrates knew that he was about to become a Grand Slayer, capturing Rowan seemed an insignificant matter, better left to his successor. But now that Goddard had him, it changed the entire board. I intend to present him to the council at the inquest tomorrow as a goodwill gesture, Goddard said. It is my hope that it could be a feather in your cap rather than a thorn in your side. Xenocrates did not like the sound of that. What do you mean? Well, on the one hand, Goddard said, I could tell the council that it was your efforts that led me to capturing him. I was working under your directive. Then he paused to finger a paperweight on a table, setting it rocking back and forth. Or I could point to the apparent incompetence of your investigation. But was it really incompetence? After all, Scythe Constantine is regarded as the best investigator in all the Americas, and the fact that Rowan Damish visited you in your favorite bathhouse suggests, at the very least, collusion between the two of you. If not friendship. If people knew about that meeting, they might think, among other things, that you were behind his crimes all along. Xenocrates drew a deep breath. It was like being punched in the gut. He could already see the brush that Goddard was holding, and was poised to paint a huge swath across him. Never mind that the meeting was entirely Damish's doing, and that Xenocrates had absolutely done nothing wrong. That didn't matter. The innuendo was enough to skewer him. Get out! Yelled Xenocrates. Get out before I hurl you from this window. Oh, please do, said a gleeful Goddard. This body of mine enjoys a good splatting. And when Xenocrates made no move, Goddard laughed. Not a cruel, cold laugh, but a hearty one. A friendly one. He grabbed Zenocrates' shoulders and shook it gently as if they were the best of comrades. "You have no need to worry, old friend," he said. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I will make no accusation and will tell no one that Rowan paid you a visit. In fact, as a precaution, I've already gleaned the bathhouse bartender who is spreading rumors. Rest assured, whether I win or lose the inquest, your secret will be safe with me. Because in spite of what you may think, I'm an honorable man too." Then Goddard sauntered out. Swaggered was more like it. No doubt the muscle memory of the young man whose body he now had. And Zenocrates realized that Goddard wasn't lying. He would be true to his word. He wouldn't cast aspersions on Zenocrates or tell the council of how he had let Rowan Damish go that night. Goddard wasn't here to blackmail Zenocrates. His purpose was to simply let Zenocrates know that he could. Which meant that even here, at the pinnacle of the Scythedom, at the top of the world, Zenocrates was still nothing but a bug, ever so carefully pinched between Goddard's stolen fingers. The guide giving Scythe Curie and Anastasia a personalized tour of the island's highlights had lived on Endura for over 80 years, and exhibited a sense of pride that she hadn't left the floating island once in all that time. "Once you've found paradise, why go anywhere else?" she told them. It was difficult to not be awed by the things Anastasia saw. Gorgeous gardens on terraced hills that looked like an actual landscape. Skywalks connecting the many towers, as well as glass seawalks that ran from building to building on the island's underbelly, each programmed with its own ambient sea life swarming around it. In the Museum of the Scythedom, there was the Chamber of the Enduring Heart, which Anastasia had heard rumors of, but until recently never truly believed existed. The heart floated in a glass cylinder, connected to a biologically merged electrodes. It beat at a steady rate, its sound amplified in the room so that everyone could hear. One could say that Endura is alive because it has a heart, their guide said. The heart is the oldest living human organ on Earth. It began beating in the mortal age, toward the beginning of the 21st century, as part of the earliest experiments in immortality, and hasn't stopped since. "Whose heart is it?" Anastasia asked. The guide was stumped, as if she had never been asked that question before. "I don't know," she said. "Probably some random test subject, I suppose. The mortal age was a barbaric time. One could barely cross the street in the early 21st century without being kidnapped for experimentation." But to Anastasia, the highlight of the tour was the Vault of Relics and Futures. It wasn't a place open to the public, but even Scythes had to get special permission from Highblade or Grandslayer to see it, which they had. It was a solid steel cubic chamber, magnetically suspended within a larger cube like a puzzle box. It was accessible by a narrow, retractable bridge. The central chamber was designed after the Mortal Age bank vault, their guide told them, a foot of solid steel on all sides. The door alone weighs almost 2 tons. As they crossed the bridge to the inner vault, the guide reminded them that there were no pictures allowed. The Scythedom is strict about that. Outside of these walls, this place must exist only in memory. The inner chamber was 20 feet across, and on one side were mounted a series of golden mannequins, all dressed in aging Scythe robes. One of the embroidered multicolored silk, another of cobalt blue satin, another of gossamer silver lace. 13 in total. Anastasia gasped. She couldn't help herself, because she recognized them from her history lessons. "Are these the robes of the founding Scythes?" The guide smiled and strode past them, pointing to each as she passed. Da Vinci, Gandhi, Sappho, King, Laozi, Lenin, Cleopatra, Powhatan, Jefferson, Gershwin, Elizabeth, Confucius, and, of course, Supreme Blade Prometheus. All the founders' robes are preserved here. Anastasia noted with some satisfaction that all the female founders went by single name, as she did. Even Scythe Curie was impressed at the display of founders' robe. To be in the presence of such greatness does take one's breath away. So enamored was Anastasia of the robes of the founders that it took her a few moments to notice what lined the other 3 walls of the vault. Diamonds! Row after row of them. The room glistened with every color of the spectrum refracting through the gems. These were the gems that had been on every Scythe's ring. They were all of identical size and shape, and all had the same dark center. The gems were forged by the founding Scythes, and are here for safekeeping, the guy told her. No one knows how they were made. It is a technology lost to the Scythedom. But there's no need to worry. There are enough gems here to bejewel nearly 400,000 Scythes. Why, wondered Sinitra, would there ever be a need for 400,000 Scythes? Does anyone know why they look the way they do, she asked. I'm sure the founders did, their guide said, cheerily evading the question. Then she tried to dazzle them with facts about the vault's locking mechanism. To complete the day, they went to the Endura Opera House that evening for a performance of Verdi's Ada. There was no threat of annihilation and no obsequious neighbors beside them. In fact, many of those present were visiting Scythes, which made getting in and out of their row a much major endeavor, considering the bulkiness of all those Scythe robes. The music was lush and melodramatic. It instantly brought Anastasia back to the only other opera she had seen, also by Verdi. She had first met Rowan that night. They had been brought together by Scythe Curie. She had not the slightest inkling that he would ask her to be an apprentice, but Rowan had known, or at least suspected it. The opera was easy to follow, a forbidden love between an Egyptian military commander and rival queen, which ended with eternal entombment for the two of them. So many Mortal Age narratives concluded with the finality of death. It was as if they were endlessly obsessed with the limited nature of their lives. Well, at least, the music was pretty. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Marie asked as they descended the Grand Opera House when the performance was over. "I am ready to state our cause," Anastasia said, deferring to the fact that it was not just hers, but theirs. "Not sure I'm ready to face the possible outcome, though. If we lose the inquest, it still might have the votes to be High Blade." "I guess we'll know soon enough." "Either way," said Marie, "it will be an overwhelming prospect. To be High Blade of Mid-America is not something I ever desired. Well, maybe in my youth, those days when I swung my blade to bring down the bloated egos of high and mighty. But not anymore. When Scythe Faraday took Rowan and me on as apprentices, he told us that not wanting the job is the first step towards deserving it." Marie smiled at her ruefully. "We are forever impaled upon our own wisdom." Then her smile faded. "If I do become High Blade, you realize I will, for the sake of the Scythedom, have to hunt Rowan down and bring him to justice." And although it pained Anastasia more than she could say, she nodded in stoic resignation. "If it is your justice, then I will accept it. Our choices are not easy, nor should they be." Anastasia looked out at the ocean, how it played on the water all the way to the horizon. She had never felt so far away from herself as she did there. She had never felt so far from Rowan. So far that she couldn't even count the miles between them. Perhaps there were no miles between them. In Scythe Brahm's vacation home, not far from the opera house, Rowan remained locked away in a furnished basement with a sub-sea view. "This is far better than you deserve," Goddard had told him when they arrived that morning. "Tomorrow I shall present you to the Grand Slayers, and with their permission will glean you with the same brutality as which you cut my head from my body." "Endura is a glean-free zone," Rowan reminded him. "For you, I'm sure they'll make an exception," Goddard said. When he was gone and Rowan had been locked in, he sat down and took a final accounting of his life. His childhood was unremarkable, punctuated with moments of intentional mediocrity in an attempt not to stand out. He shined as a friend. He supposed he stood a shoulder above when it came to doing the right thing, even when the right thing was a truly stupid thing, and it seemed most of the time it was, or he wouldn't be in this mess he was in right now. He was not ready to leave this world, but after having gone deadish so many times over the past few months, he no longer feared what eternity might bring. He did want to live long enough to see Goddard taken down for good, but if that wasn't going to happen, he was fine having his existence ended now. That way he wouldn't have to watch the world fall victim to Goddard's twisted philosophies, but not to see Citra again. That would be so much harder. He would see her, though. She would be here at the inquest. He would see her, and she would have to watch as Goddard gleaned him. For it was certainly part of Goddard's plan to force her to witness it, to scar her, to ruin her. But she would not be ruined. The honorable Scythe Anastasia was much stronger than Goddard would ever give her credit for. It could only serve to make her resolve stronger. Rowan was determined to grin and wink at her as he was gleaned, as if to say, "Goddard can end me, but he can't hurt me." And that would be the parting memory with which he would leave her. Cool, casual defiance. Denying Goddard the satisfaction of Rowan's terror would be almost as gratifying as surviving. And that is the end of the longest chapter in the book, I believe. Thank you all so much for hanging out for this 30-minute episode of Storytime with Freak. We will have another one up shortly. Our daily conversational topic is going to be, how did you find this channel and this series? Were you already subscribed for the gaming stuff? Did a friend share it with you? Did YouTube recommend it to you? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you all in the next one. Stay freaky.